James Hawthorne left his wife, but 20 years later, he finds her at the airport with a young woman who looks like him. Hello. You are very welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. The morning sun bathed John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York as James Hawthorne, a 45-year-old executive, hurried through the terminal. His impeccable suit and wheeled suitcase contrasted with the tired expression on his face. James was about to embark on yet another business trip, something that had become routine in his solitary life. While waiting in line for check-in, his eyes wandered around the bustling lobby. It was then that his heart stopped for a moment. Less than 20 meters away, he saw a face he hadn't seen in 18 years, Sarah, his ex-wife. The initial shock gave way to a wave of conflicting emotions: guilt, regret, and a pang of curiosity. Sarah looked different, older, of course, but still possessed that elegance that had always attracted him. Her blonde hair, now with some gray strands, was pulled back in a casual bun. She was smiling, something James hadn't seen in a long time, especially directed at him. But it wasn't Sarah who took James's breath away. Beside her stood a young woman, no more than 18 years old, with features he would recognize anywhere. The same green eyes, the same upturned nose, the same captivating smile he saw every morning in the mirror. The realization hit him like lightning. This young woman could only be his daughter, the child he had never known, the baby Sarah had been carrying when he, overwhelmed with panic and immaturity, decided to abandon everything 18 years ago. Time seemed to freeze as James fought against the impulse to run, to hide, to pretend he hadn't seen them. But something inside him, perhaps the weight of 18 years of regret, kept him rooted in place. Sarah noticed him. Their eyes met through the crowd, and James saw a mix of surprise and apprehension in her gaze. The young woman beside her, oblivious to the sudden tension, continued to speak animatedly, likely about the trip they were about to take. James felt the world spin around him. Everything he had carefully built over the last 18 years, professional success, superficial relationships, constant travel, seemed empty and meaningless in the face of seeing Sarah and the daughter he had never known. In that moment, James made a decision that would change the course of his life. He stepped out of line, ignoring the protests of the people behind him, and began to walk towards Sarah and the young woman. Each step felt like an eternity, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the airport could hear it. As he approached, James saw Sarah's expression change. The initial surprise gave way to a cautious, protective demeanor. She subtly moved, as if to shield her daughter from an impending danger. The young woman, noticing her mother's shift in posture, finally looked at James with curiosity. James stopped a few steps away, feeling the weight of 18 years of absence between them. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? How could he explain 18 years of cowardice and regret? It was Sarah who broke the silence. "James," she said, her voice a mix of emotions he couldn't decipher. "I didn't expect to see you here." The young woman looked from Sarah to James, confusion evident on her face. "Mom?" she asked, her voice filled with unspoken questions. James felt the weight of the moment, knowing that his next words could change everything. He looked at the daughter he had never known, seeing in her all the lost years, all the firsts he had missed. James began, his voice faltering. He swallowed hard and tried again. "I'm so sorry. For everything." The silence that followed James's words felt infinite. Sarah, with her lips pressed together, stared intently at him, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. The young woman, still confused, alternated her gaze between her mother and the stranger in front of her. "Mom, who is he?" the girl finally asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Sarah took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment before responding. "Emily, this is James, your biological father." Emily's eyes widened, and she took a step back as if she had been shocked. My father, she murmured, incredulous. James felt as if he had been punched in the stomach upon hearing the word father associated with him. It was a title he had abandoned long ago, a role he had never played. Emily, he said softly, testing his daughter's name for the first time. I know this is a shock. For all of us. Sarah interjected, her voice firm. James, this is neither the place nor the time for this. We have a flight to catch. Please, James pleaded, feeling that this could be his only chance. Just give me a few minutes. Can we grab a coffee? I need to explain. Emily, who had remained silent, surprised everyone. I want to hear, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Mom, can we? Sarah looked at her daughter, then at James, clearly conflicted. Finally, she nodded. We have an hour until boarding. Not a minute more. The three of them made their way to a nearby cafe, the heavy silence hanging between them. They sat at a secluded table, away from curious ears. James, with his hands trembling slightly, began to speak. He recounted the paralyzing fear he felt when Sarah announced the pregnancy, how he felt unprepared to be a father at 27, the pressure of his budding career. He spoke of the night he packed his bags and left quietly, convinced he was doing Sarah and the baby a favor by removing himself from the equation. I was a coward, James admitted, his voice choked. I thought you would be better off without me. But the truth is, I was terrified and chose the easiest way out. Emily, who had listened in silence, spoke up. You never thought about us? About all those years? James felt tears burning in his eyes. Every day, he replied. Not a single day went by that I didn't think of you, that I didn't regret my decision. But the longer it went, the harder it felt to come back. Sarah, who had maintained a neutral expression throughout the conversation, finally spoke. You have no idea what we went through, James. The sleepless nights, the bills, Emily's questions about the father she never knew. James lowered his head, shame evident in every line of his face. I know I can't undo what I did. I know I've lost precious moments that I can never get back. But I'm here now. If you'll allow me, I would like to try to make things right. Emily looked at her mother, then at James. I've always wanted to meet my dad, she said slowly. But now that you're here, I don't know what to feel. The conflict was clear on Sarah's face. Years of hurt and resentment were battling against the possibility of giving her daughter the chance to know her father. James, Sarah finally said, you owe us 18 years. This isn't something that can be resolved in a conversation at an airport. James nodded, feeling a mix of hope and fear. I know, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Can I have your number? Maybe we can meet when you come back from your trip. Sarah hesitated, but Emily intervened. Mom, please. I want this chance. With a resigned sigh, Sarah took a napkin and wrote down her phone number. I can't promise anything, James, but for Emily, I'm willing to try. James took the napkin as if it were the most precious object in the world. Thank you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I promise I won't waste this chance. As they stood up to say goodbye, the announcement for Sarah and Emily's flight echoed through the terminal. It was time to leave. Emily, in an impulsive gesture, gave James a quick hug. See you later, Dad, she said, testing the word. James felt his heart shatter and rebuild in that moment. As he watched Sarah and Emily walk away toward the boarding gate, he knew his life would never be the same. 3 months had passed since the unexpected encounter at the airport. James, Sarah, and Emily had kept in touch through texts and a few carefully timed phone calls. The relationship remained fragile, marked by moments of tension and discomfort, but also by flashes of hope and connection. One Saturday afternoon, James received a message from Emily that would change everything. Dad, can you come to Central Park tomorrow? I have something I want to show you. James's heart raced. It was the first time Emily had invited him to something, the first time she had taken the initiative. With trembling hands, he responded that he would be there. On Sunday, James arrived at the park an hour early, nervous and anxious. When he finally spotted Emily arriving with Sarah, he felt a mix of joy and apprehension. "Hi, Dad," Emily said, still hesitant to use the word. "Thanks for coming." Sarah nodded, her face a mask of contained emotions. "James," she formally greeted him. Emily led them down a winding path until they reached a small outdoor amphitheater. To James's surprise, there was a group of young musicians preparing for a performance. "This is it," Emily said, a shy smile playing on her lips. I have a performance today. It's my first time playing violin in public." James felt a wave of emotion wash over him. His daughter was a violinist, something so fundamental about her, and he had no idea until that moment. "Emily, that's amazing," he said, his voice choked. "I didn't know you played." Sarah interjected, her voice soft, but with a hint of pride. "She started at 6. She has a natural talent." Emily blushed at the compliment. "I wanted you both to be here. It's important to me." At that moment, something changed in the air between the three of them. The invisible barrier separating them seemed to diminish a little. James and Sarah sat side by side in the bleachers, a silence heavy with history between them. When Emily took the stage with her violin, they both held their breath. The first notes of meditation from Thais filled the air, and James felt tears streaming down his face. The music was heartbreakingly beautiful, full of emotion and nostalgia. He looked at Sarah and saw that she was also silently crying. As Emily played, James was flooded with images of what could have been. Teaching Emily to ride a bike, celebrating her birthdays, attending school recitals. The pain of missing those moments was almost unbearable. But then, looking at his daughter on stage, so talented and graceful, James realized something crucial. He couldn't change the past, but he still had the chance to be part of Emily's future. When the music ended and the audience erupted in applause, James and Sarah stood up, their hands brushing against each other briefly. In that fleeting moment of contact, something passed between them, a silent understanding, perhaps even the beginning of forgiveness. Emily ran up to them, her eyes shining with emotion. "What did you think?" she asked eagerly. James hugged her without hesitation. "It was wonderful, Emily. You're amazing." Sarah joined in the hug, wrapping her arms around Emily and, by extension, James. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." In that collective embrace, something fundamental changed. James realized that he was not only reconnecting with his daughter, but also rebuilding a bridge with Sarah. The road ahead would still be long and difficult, but for the first time in 18 years, James felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As they pulled away, Emily looked at the two of them with hope in her eyes. Can we try to be a family? I know it's complicated, but..." James and Sarah exchanged a glance. Years of hurt and regret weighed heavily between them, but there was also a spark of something new, possibility. "We can try," Sarah said softly, surprising everyone, including herself. James nodded, feeling the weight of that moment. "One day at a time," he promised. "We'll make this work." As they walked together through the park, James knew this was the true turning point. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to have hope. The months following Emily's recital in Central Park were an emotional roller coaster for James, Sarah, and Emily. The promise of one day at a time became a mantra for the rebuilding family as they navigated unknown and often turbulent waters. Determined to keep his word, James began making significant changes in his life. He cut back on his business trips, prioritizing time with Emily and working to rebuild trust with Sarah. Every family dinner, every difficult conversation, every shared moment was a step toward redemption. One Saturday afternoon, while helping Emily with her history homework, James found himself confronted with a question that caught him off guard. "Dad," Emily began hesitantly, "why did you really leave?" James felt the weight of that question. He knew the answer he had given at the airport months ago wasn't enough. Emily deserved more. She deserved the whole truth. "Emily," he said, putting the pen down on the table, The truth is that I was a coward. It wasn't just fear of being a father. I had my own demons to face, insecurities, doubts about my worth. I thought running away would solve everything, but it only created more problems. Emily looked at him with a mix of pain and understanding. Do you regret it? Every day, James replied, his voice choked. But regret without action is useless. That's why I'm here now, trying to fix things, even if it's late. At that moment, Emily did something that surprised James. She hugged him. It's not too late, she whispered. Meanwhile, Sarah was facing her own internal battles. Years of resentment and hurt didn't disappear overnight. She struggled to balance her desire to give Emily a chance to know her father with the need to protect herself and her daughter from more pain. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah confronted James in the kitchen. How can I trust that you won't leave again? She asked, her words heavy with years of pent-up pain. James felt the weight of that question. He knew that words wouldn't be enough. Sarah, he began, I know I broke your trust in a way that words can't fix. But I'm committed to proving, with my actions, every day, that I'm here to stay. Not just for Emily, but for you too. For us. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, searching for signs of falsehood. Finding only sincerity, she nodded slowly. I'll try to believe that, James. For Emily. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, small moments of growth and overcoming began to accumulate. James learned to be a father, facing the challenges of raising a teenager with humility and determination. Sarah gradually lowered her defenses, allowing herself to see the man James had become, not just the man he had been. Emily, in turn, thrived with both parents present in her life. Her musical talent continued to grow, and she began to open up more about her dreams and fears. One day, during a picnic in the park, something that had become a Sunday tradition for them, Emily made an announcement that took James and Sarah by surprise. I want to do a solo performance, she said, her eyes shining with excitement. An entire recital, just me. James and Sarah exchanged looks of pride and concern. Are you sure, dear? Sarah asked. It's a big responsibility. Emily nodded with determination. I know I can do it, especially if I have you both supporting me. James felt his heart swell with love and pride. We'll be there for you, Emily, every step of the way. In that moment, looking at his brave daughter and at Sarah, who had found the strength to forgive, James realized how much they had all grown. The road ahead would still be full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt truly at peace. The journey of overcoming and growth was far from over, but James, Sarah, and Emily were facing it together, one day at a time, building something new and beautiful from the ashes of the past. The big day of Emily's solo recital finally arrived. The small auditorium of the music school was packed, with family, friends, and classical music enthusiasts eager to hear the promising young violinist. Backstage, Emily nervously adjusted her navy blue dress, her hands trembling slightly as she tuned her violin one last time. James and Sarah were by her side, offering words of encouragement. You're going to crush it, dear, Sarah said, fixing a loose strand of Emily's hair. James, holding his daughter's hands, added, Remember, no matter what happens out there, we are proud of you. Emily hugged both of them, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. Thank you for being here, both of you. When Emily stepped onto the stage, silence fell over the audience. James and Sarah sat in the front row, their hands unconsciously entwined in anticipation. The first notes of Bach's Chaconne filled the air, and the tension on Emily's face was replaced by an expression of pure concentration. The music flowed from her as if it were an extension of her very being, each note laden with emotion and impeccable technique. James felt tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the beauty of his daughter's performance and the realization of how much he had almost missed. He looked at Sarah and saw that she was also silently crying, her expression a mirror of his. As the music reached its climax, Emily faced a particularly challenging passage. For a brief moment, she hesitated, her confidence wavering. James and Sarah held their breath, their hearts racing in unison. But then, as if feeling the silent support of her parents, Emily lifted her chin, closed her eyes, and dove back into the music with renewed determination. Her hands flew over the strings, extracting notes that seemed impossible, filling the auditorium with a melody that touched the souls of everyone present. When the last note reverberated through the auditorium, there was a moment of stunned silence before the audience erupted into applause. Emily opened her eyes, a radiant smile lighting up her face as she took a bow. James and Sarah stood up, clapping with all their might, tears of joy and pride streaming down their faces. Emily rushed to them as soon as she left the stage, wrapping both of them in a tight embrace. "You saw? I did it!" she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. "We did," Sarah said, kissing her daughter's forehead. James, unable to contain his emotion, hugged both of them. "Emily, you didn't just play music. You reminded us of the power of perseverance, love, and forgiveness." In that moment, surrounded by friends and family who came to congratulate Emily, James, Sarah, and Emily felt truly united as a family for the first time. Later that night, while celebrating at a small Italian restaurant, Emily looked at her parents with shining eyes of happiness. "You know," she began, "when I was playing that difficult part and almost stumbled, I thought about the three of us, about how we've faced so many challenges, but we managed to overcome them together. That gave me the strength to continue." James and Sarah exchanged emotional glances, the realization of how much they had grown and healed over the past few months hitting them with full force. "Emily," James said, his voice choked, "you didn't just give us an amazing performance today. You gave us a second chance as a family." Sarah took James's hand across the table, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months ago. "We're here now," she said softly. "All of us, and that's what matters." While the small family shared smiles and tears of joy, James felt that he had finally found his place in the world. The past, with all its pains and regrets, could not be changed. But the future, bright and full of possibilities, was right there before them. And in that moment, James knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family. 2 years had passed since Emily's solo recital. The Hawthorne family's life had stabilized into a new normal, filled with challenges, but also moments of joy and growth. On a sunny Saturday morning, James, Sarah, and Emily were gathered in the kitchen of their home in a quiet suburb of New York. The aroma of pancakes and coffee filled the air as they discussed their plans for the future. Emily, now 20, was preparing to begin her studies at the prestigious Juilliard School of Music. Her talent with the violin had blossomed even more in recent years, and she was about to realize her dream of becoming a professional musician. "I'm nervous, but excited," Emily confessed, absent-mindedly stirring her cup of tea. "It's a big change." James smiled, placing his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You're ready for this, Emily. Your hard work and dedication have brought you this far." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Besides, we'll be here to support you every step of the way." Emily looked at her parents with gratitude. "I know, and that means everything to me." James and Sarah exchanged looks filled with meaning. In the past 2 years, they had worked hard to rebuild not only their relationship with Emily, but also between themselves. Family therapy, honest conversations, and a shared commitment to forgiveness and growth had transformed their dynamic. "You know," James began, his voice soft, "looking back, I realize how much we've all grown. Emily, you've become an incredible young woman. And Sarah," he paused, looking at his ex-wife with admiration, "your strength and ability to forgive inspire me every day." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "It hasn't been easy, James, but seeing the effort you've made, how dedicated you have been as a father to Emily, that has healed a lot of old wounds. Emily watched her parents with a smile. You know, for a long time I dreamed of moments like this. Having you both here, together, without tension or resentment. It's more than I could have hoped for. James felt a lump in his throat. Emily, I'm so sorry for all the years I lost. But I promise I'll be here for all the important moments from now on. We both will, Sarah added, taking Emily's hand. At that moment, Emily's phone rang. It was a video call from her boyfriend, Jake, who was studying on the West Coast. Hey, Jake, Emily answered cheerfully. Wait, let me show you something. She turned the phone, showing James and Sarah sitting together at the kitchen table. Look, family breakfast. Jake smiled on the screen. It's great to see you all together, Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne. James and Sarah exchanged surprised glances at how naturally Jake treated them as a family unit. It was a reminder of how much things had changed. After Emily finished the call, James cleared his throat. Emily, Sarah, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. The two looked at him curiously. In recent months, I've been thinking a lot about the future, about how I can continue to be a part of your lives in a more permanent way. He paused, gathering courage. I was thinking about moving closer, maybe buying a house in the neighborhood. The silence that followed was broken by Emily's radiant smile. Dad, that would be amazing. Sarah, on the other hand, looked thoughtful. James, are you sure? It would be a big change for you. James nodded. I'm sure. I've lost so many years, Sarah. I don't want to miss another moment. Sarah smiled gently. Well, I think it would be good for Emily to have you both close while she studies. Actually, Emily interjected, it would be good for all of us. As they discussed the details and possibilities, James felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. The path to this point hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, heated arguments, and bitter tears. But there had also been laughter, hugs, and the joy of rediscovering family love. Looking at Sarah and Emily, James realized he had received so much more than he deserved. A second chance, not only to be a father, but to be part of a loving and united family. Thank you, he said softly, interrupting the lively conversation between mother and daughter. Thank you for giving me this second chance. Sarah reached out, gently touching James's arm. Thank you for not giving up. Emily, with tears in her eyes, hugged both of them. Thank you for being my parents, both of you. And there, in the sunlit kitchen, with the aroma of coffee and the sound of laughter, the Hawthorne family celebrated not only their reconciled past, but also the bright future they had ahead, together. 5 years had passed since that Saturday morning in the Hawthorne kitchen. Time had brought changes, growth, and new joys for the family. Emily, now 25, had graduated with honors from Juilliard and was making a name for herself in the classical music world. Her career as a solo violinist was taking off, with performances in renowned concert halls around the globe. James, true to his word, had moved to the same neighborhood as Sarah and Emily. He found a cozy house just a few blocks away, allowing him to be a constant presence in his daughter's life, even with her busy touring schedule. Sarah, inspired by the family's journey of reconciliation, had returned to school to obtain a master's degree in family counseling. She now worked part-time as a therapist, helping other families overcome challenges and find paths to healing. On an autumn afternoon, the Hawthorne family gathered in Central Park, at the same spot where Emily had made her first public performance years ago. The reason for the gathering was special. Emily was going to play an original composition, written especially for her parents. As Emily positioned herself, her violin in hand, a small crowd began to form, drawn by the beauty of the scene and the promise of music. This piece, Emily announced, her voice clear and confident, is called Second Chances. It's dedicated to my parents, who taught me that it's never too late to rebuild, to love, and to forgive. The first notes filled the air, a bittersweet melody that spoke of loss, regret, and ultimately redemption. James and Sarah, sitting side by side on a park bench, listened with their eyes closed, each note evoking memories from the past years, the challenges they faced, the joys they shared, and the love they rediscovered. When the music came to an end, there was a moment of reverent silence before the crowd erupted in applause. Emily ran over to hug her parents, the three of them merging into an emotional embrace. "That was beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. James, also moved, added, "You captured our journey perfectly." Later, as they walked through the park, Emily linked arms with her parents, and James reflected aloud. 7 years ago, I could never have imagined we'd be here like this." Sarah smiled, a smile full of understanding and forgiveness. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Emily tightened her grip on her parents. "I'm so glad we decided to give this family a chance." As the sun set over New York, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the Hawthorne family continued their stroll, talking and laughing. They had learned that love, even when tested by time and circumstances, can bloom again if nurtured with patience, understanding, and forgiveness. James looked at Sarah and Emily, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He knew that the past couldn't be changed, but the present was a precious gift, and the future was full of possibilities. And so, under the twilight sky of New York, the Hawthorne family continued their journey, no longer as individuals separated by the pain of the past, but as a unit strengthened by love, understanding, and the promise of many happy years ahead. I sincerely hope that you were enchanted by this story. I'm sure the next video that appears to you will also touch your heart. So, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next stories. A big hug and see you next time.